programs are just now starting. So be patient with me. We'll get that started. Okay, I think they're all online now. So anyway, thank you for joining me today. This is Bonnie with Digging In with Bonnie. Uh, I've had a few real busy weeks, productive but busy. We did our dice run, which turned out very well. It benefited the APL. So hopefully some of these little furry animals that don't have homes at least have what they need now, and hopefully people go and adopt them. You know, I think it's like $100 fee if you adopt, but they have all their shots, they're fixed, they're ready to go. So go find yourself a little loving fur ball and take them home and enjoy them. What else did we have? Oh, we had our family reunion. That was very nice. And there was something else that I had going on that kept me away for another week. I can't even remember. But I just wanted to tell you, for those of you that don't know, I live in Ashtabula, Ohio. Unfortunately, Ashtabula has a bad name. So I'm going to tell you some good about Ashtabula real quick. We had our wine and walleye. It was a success. Everybody enjoyed themselves. Good turnout. Ashtabula's decided to at least try to bring back dog days. They had it last week. Unfortunately, I did not go, but I heard it was a really good turnout. People enjoyed themselves. Other than that, it's been nice and quiet. They now have a pavilion, a small pavilion, of course, down by the Coast Guard, right down here on 5th Street by the bridge, where you could sit out of the sun and watch the boats go by and enjoy yourselves. So, just come take a look and see what Ashtabula really does have to offer. About the only thing we could do now is maybe bring in some businesses. That would be wonderful. If we had some businesses where people had jobs, I think people would be a little happier and, more thrilled with seeing Ashtabula on the map there. I guess I'm out of practice, and of course, I don't have my co-host anymore, so we're just going to wing it. However, in these past few weeks, me being so busy, I didn't even prepare for today's show. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to tell the story of a killer is loose. I hope you don't mind my reading technique. Sometimes I catch myself up a little bit, but that's okay because we still get the story and we, get the understanding. If we get it done in time, great. If not, we will continue on next week with it because it does appear I will be on next week. I know I originally said that I wouldn't be, but it looks like plans have changed. If this turns out well and you prefer us to do it this way where I have no knowledge of what we're doing either and until we do it, let me know because sometimes that could make things more interesting. I'm going to apologize now if I start coughing. Apparently I am coming down with a cold. I just thought maybe, a lot of sanding and stuff would have my lungs a little full, but unfortunately I think I was wrong. I think I have to get rid of a cold and then hopefully next week everything will be even more peaceful for you. Wasn't sure today was going to happen. As I was coming upstairs to my office to do this, I went to set a cup down and I ended up spilling tea all over my router and modem. I think that's what you call them. But something's working out right because we're on and everything's good. Again, and I do have a phone number here somewhere. I have to still get into that. But you can go on Facebook and message me throughout the conversations. Any input you have, anything, any opinions, anything are welcome. So let's get this going today. So it's A Killer is Loose, and it was actually written by a Joseph P. Blank. As the residents of Jerrysville, a town of 7,500 people in southwestern Illinois, started about their daily affairs on a mild, sunny Friday morning of October 9th, 1969, alarming news wildfired among them. A cold-blooded killer was hiding somewhere in their area. Back in 1969, I was only 2. Yeah, that's it. I just told you my age. But Could you imagine back then things were supposed to be so peaceful and everything? I'm sure everybody started really locking their doors. The 21-year-old killer, James Gordon Palmer, was a Jerseyville man. Police Chief Herman Blackerty described him as a nice-looking, nice-talking boy who didn't mind killing you. Wow. In a ramble through Missouri, Illinois, and Tennessee, he had robbed and murdered a bait shop owner, a young waitress, and a filling station attendant. He had fired bullets into the back of their heads in the case of 2 of them, while they lay face down on the floor, until they stopped moving. On the night of October 8th, sheriff's deputies had spotted Palmer as he drove up to his Jerseyville apartment. He raced them to the outskirts of town, jumped from his car, and escaped the cornfield. I'm assuming they meant in the cornfield. An hour later, he shot and wounded a railroad brakeman shining a lantern near a ditch where he lay hidden. Now more than 100 police, state troopers, and sheriff's deputies had coverage on Jerseyville. They put bloodhounds around the spot where Palmer had fled, but the dogs couldn't pick up any scent. They patrolled all roads and searched hundreds of buildings. Each school bus carried an armed policeman, a helicopter, there also was a helicopter, and 4 small planes kept crisscrossing nearby farmlands. Radio broadcasters warned listeners to lock their doors. Police feared that Palmer might massacre an isolated farm family to steal a car. As the hours passed, the police of Jerseyville grew increasingly jumpy. By afternoon, sporting goods stores had sold out of their supplies of guns and ammunition. Several farm families drove into town to stay at the hotel. One woman, hearing a noise in the basement, riddled her kitchen floor with buckshots. For those of you that know, I think the buckshots are exactly, just what they say. They were used for hunting. And I'm trying to imagine being a lady home by herself back then, and it kind of puts a new twist on whether or not they should be in guns, I guess. In a squat brick building that housed the 2 office rooms of Gorman Brothers Construction Company on Franklin Street, business continued as usual. But that evening, Louis Gorman found his wife and 2 children frightened. Gorman, a quiet and gentle man, 52 and graying, tried to reassure them. Palmer is probably well on his way to Mexico by now, he said. Nevertheless, he slept restlessly. He arose before 5, dressed, and drove down to Sandy's Cafe, where he drank coffee and talked with the 2 men from a posse that had searched for Palmer through the night. Then shortly after 7, Gorman drove to the office. 2 truck drivers, Charles and his son-in-law Robert, arrived at the same time. When Gorman put his key into the back lock, he found it unlocked. He made a mental note to remind his men to check the doors before leaving at night. Entering the building, Gorman went to the washroom. He saw the glass pane in the rear door had been broken and covered with cardboard. But as he assumed that one of his men had broken the window on the previous day. Meanwhile, Charlie walked around the counter in the outer office, stepped into an inner office, and was confronted by a man pointing a .22 caliber semi-automatic rifle. His mouth fell open. He backed away, repeating incredulously, "Lewis is here. That guy is here." Palmer, tall, lean, blonde, and boyish face, said, "Do as I tell you and you won't get killed. Sit down on the floor of the inside office and don't move." And of course they obeyed. Gorman in the washroom heard Crusher's astonished words. Quickly he opened the washroom window. Sorry. But he couldn't push out the screen. Palmer banged on the door and said, "Are you coming out or will I have to shoot you through the door?" Gorman came out. I'm sorry. "Sit down with your buddies," Palmer directed. He asked the trio if the owner of the business was among them. Gorman answered. The killer nodded toward him and said, "Open the safe, brother." "I can't," Gorman said. "It's a tricky combination lock, and our office manager, Ernie, is the only one who knows how to open it." "Brother, you're lying," Palmer said evenly. "I've got a notion to kill you right now." He moved his rifle. "I'm not lying. Ernie will open the safe when he comes in." Gorman later admitted he was scared. He had no way of knowing at this point a twisted whim might prompt the killer to start shooting. At that moment, truck driver Edward Fitzgibbons drove his pickup truck to the back of the building. Palmer crouched behind the service counter. Fitzgibbons, noticing the broken pane in the rear drawer, ambled into the office saying, "Hey, it looks like somebody broke in here." Palmer rose from behind the counter, his gun leveled. "And I'm still here," he announced. "You just sit down on the floor with your buddies." And he did so. The next captive was William, a railroader engineer for the local freight line, who dropped in to tell Gorman that a car of cement had arrived. The engineer was followed by Herschel Andrews, a construction equipment officer, and then truck driver Darrell Smith. Ernie Pullman was a little late that morning, reluctant to leave his wife and 3 children in the house 6 miles out in the country. He had stayed to show his wife how to fire his shotgun. His first sensation was confronted by Palmer was relief. At least he knew his family was safe. When Pullman identified himself, Palmer said, "Just the man. Open the safe, Ernie." Pullman knelt before the safe, which for a long time had been difficult to open. He twirled the knob. He failed the first try. He failed again. In a warning tone, Palmer said, "Ernie?" Again, Pullman muffed the combination. Palmer said, "Ernie, I'll give you 1 more minute. If you don't open that safe, you're a dead man." "Take your time," Ernie Grumman urged. "A minute's a long time." Pullman's face was white and wet with sweat. He carefully turned the dial again, heard the tumbler click, and slumped with relief. He dumped the contents of the money box on the floor. Palmer nodded to Bill and said, "Now, sir, I want you to get the bills from the wallets and put the money in the paper bag." When Colonel had completed his task, Gorman said to Palmer, "You've got all that we can give you. Why don't you take off?" Palmer ignored the suggestion and stared at the man for a minute. "Brother," he said to Gorman, "write out a sign saying close until 1 p.m. and put it on the window of the front door." He seemed to have a plan in mind. Gorman penciled the words on a rectangle of cardboard. As he taped the sign to the door window, he saw a man step onto the porch of the house across the street. He kept rubbing the sign, hoping to attract the man's attention. But Palmer grew aware of his excess motions and said, "Brother, you're having a hard time with that sign? Get away from there." Each time Palmer gave an order, he moved the rifle decisively. Palmer then addressed the group. "Do any of you have a knife?" Nobody answered. "Take a piece of glass, sir, and cut the telephone wire." Palmer seemed to enjoy using the word "sir" in giving orders. After Kuno had cut the cord, Palmer asked, "Is there any rope around here? Anybody?" Again, nobody answered, although Gorman and his employees knew there was rope in the shed behind the building. To Gorman, Palmer repeated, "Is there any rope?" On top of the elevator outside, Gorman pointed to the elevated sand and gravel bin and cement chute about 40 feet away. A wood ladder rose from the ground to the top of the bin where 2 lengths of rope dangled. Palmer spoke to Kuno. Sometimes I wish I could pronounce these names right because each time I feel like it's coming out different. "You, sir, get up that ladder and bring down a rope." As he started out, Palmer said, "Wait, it might not look right unless it was the owner." He nodded at Gorman. "Better if you did it, brother." He ordered the 7 other men to lie on their bellies, face to the floor, hands behind their backs. "Not a false move out of any of you," he warned, "or your boss will get it." Hopefully next week I have this all taken care of. Let me see. Where did I leave that? He posted himself at the door and told Gorman to climb the ladder and get the rope. And if anyone tried anything funny, there was going to be a lot of dead men in here. Gorman climbed the ladder. As he began fooling with the rope, he stood close to the top edge of the sand bin. He wanted terribly to be free of Palmer. I could roll into the sand bin, and Palmer could never hit me, he thought. Then I'd yell for help. Maybe when the men heard me, they could make a break for it. But no, Palmer would start shooting. Gorman gathered up the rope and climbed down. In the office, Palmer told Gorman to tie the man's hands behind their backs. I'm really, really sorry. I should have this ready. Let's see. All right, behind their backs as they lay face down on the floor. First in line was Kuno. As the railroad man felt the rope go around his wrist and resign himself to death, I figured this was my time, he later recalled. I knew he was going to shoot us. Palmer tested the knot and said, "Brother, you tie a loose knot. If I find another knot like that, I'm going to shoot the man through the head." Gorman retied the knot. Then he found Fitzgibbon's wrist. Bound. I'm sorry. Oh, I guess it's not a good morning for reading, huh? All right. As the seven of us lay there, Fitzgibbon said later, "I swear I felt the floor vibrate from our heartbeats." Gorman was feeling sick at the thought that he was tying up the men so that Palmer could shoot them while helpless. This was the killer's pattern, he knew. After Gorman had tied the rest of the next man, Darrell Smith, Palmer said, 3 down, 4 to go. When they're all tied up, I'll have to shoot them through the head." On the floor, the silent men lay tense as boards, listening to the blood pound in their ears, waiting for the shots. I was never more scared in my life, Gorman later recalled, but I knew I had to do something. If I lunged at Palmer, I'd probably get a bullet in the head. If I simply obeyed him, I'd still get the bullet in the head. And so would 7 other men. Palmer sat alertly on his hunches, his rifle muzzle following Gorman's every move. Gorman, about 7 feet away, knew if he tied up the 4th man, he'd be a step farther away from the killer. He had to contrive a means of getting closer. During his 75 minutes of captivity, Gorman had noticed that whenever Palmer rose from his hunches, he invariably pointed his rifle at the ceiling before bringing it to bear on his victims. If attacked, would Palmer stick to the habit, giving his assailant an added fraction of a second, or would he fire from his hunched position? Gorman said their legs were too jammed together for me to step between them. Then step on their legs, brother. They won't be hurting for long. I'll be able to do a better job if I can work from around their heads. This would put them a little closer to Palmer. Put him. You have my permission, Palmer said. Then Gorman had a sudden idea. He felt his guts twist in fear and acted. He stepped between the second and third man and without haste pretended to stumble. He tottered then, and in a seeming effort to regain his balance, stepped over the second man, moving closer to Palmer. To make the action seem innocent, he stepped backwards, giving the killer a clear shot to his back. Again, Gorman took a step backwards, over the remaining men between him and Palmer. The killer hesitated a moment, then following habit, rose from his hunches, pointing the rifle towards the ceiling. In the split moment it took Palmer to bring the rifle down. Gorman was next to him and felt the gun barrel on his shoulder. He swung his left fist at the trigger guard, scraping the skin off his knuckles, and he knocked the gun from Palmer's hands. Then with all of his power, he shot his right first at Palmer's jaw. Right fist at Palmer's jaw. The killer went down and Gorman fell on him. Palmer groped the gun 6 inches away. Gorman jammed a knee on his wrist and hit him again, yelling, "Come on, boys." Galvanized into action, the four free men dived at Palmer and they subdued him. Character Ralph Russell came to the door, hearing the scuffle and exclamations. He peered over the counter and said, "What's going on? A crap game in this time of morning?" One of the men looked and grunted. "Palmer," Charlie ran to the nearest telephone. In 3 minutes, the sheriff's car skidded to a halt in front of the office. Deputies handcuffed Palmer, now meek and whimpering a little, and hauled him away. It was all over. Gorman and the 7 men stood staring at one another. The thought of what might have happened was coursing in his body, at his body. Bloody hand, I'm sorry. Then, in a dazed but businesslike tone, he said, "Okay, boys, we've got concrete to haul." Could you imagine after all that, now you're going to go haul your concrete? That broke the spell. Almost in chorus, the 4 truck drivers demanded, "Who the hell is going to haul it?" Gorman's felt a flush of relief and grinned. "This morning," he said, "I guess nobody is." For his brave action, Lewis Gorman received the Silver Medal of Carnegie Hero Fund Commission. Palmer is serving a 180-year prison term and will not be out unless paroled until 2020, when he will be 82. James Gordon Palmer was released on parole in 1984 after serving 25 years. Now, I mean, they never really went into detail as to why this man was doing what he was doing, how many people he had already killed that we didn't know about, or they didn't discuss. I mean, I'm trying to say, can you imagine just going to work and walking into a situation such as that? I know one time, I was working in a convenience store and we'd actually been robbed. It was the scariest thing I had ever imagined. I can only imagine walking in, to somebody with a gun and barking all these demands at you. It's all really crazy. Does anybody have anything they want to discuss on this matter, or thoughts of their own as they listen to it? Okay, so for today, I guess we're not going to get much feedback. Sometimes when you look at these stories, they look longer than what they appear to be. So I guess today's podcast won't be as long as what we were doing before. But that's okay, because I'm sure you guys are tired of hearing me cough anyway. So there's a lot of craziness that goes on in this world. And this story itself goes to show it's been going on for many, many years. It's not new. The reason we hear more about it today is because we do have social media, and social media keeps everybody on their toes, and sometimes they don't even report it right, but we're aware that things are going on. So I'm just going to go ahead and leave you guys with that thought. Next week we will do another story. Maybe I will read ahead of time, that way I'm a little better at telling it to you guys. I think I'm going to start leaving you guys on positive notes every week after we're done. But one thing I want to stress to everybody is take some time out this week for you. It doesn't matter who you are, where you are, what you're doing. If you do not take time out for you, you cannot be there the way you need to be for others. So please take that time to breathe, to go do something that means something to you, and you probably will end up having a better week. So this week's quote will be, "No one is useless in this world who lightens the burdens of another," from Charles Dickinson. So keep that in mind. And like I said, make sure you take some time for you. Even if you just go soak in a hot tub for 10 minutes, that's time for you. So on that note, from my house to